Allegations, denials, and drama. The Victor Foh 45,390 fraud case. Welcome to the Bold African Voice, BAV, where truth meets courage and silence is never an option. I'm Ahisatu Kamara Kargbo. Across the continent, corruption stories come and go, but this one hits close to home. In Sierra Leone, former Vice President Victor Bockarie Foh has been named in a shocking $45,390 fraud case. A small sum by global standards, but a big test for the nation's justice system. Was it mere coincidence or another symptom of Africa's elite immunity culture? Tonight, we go beyond the headlines, examining the power, the politics, and the price of integrity. In late September 2025, the name Victor Bockarie Foh, Sierra Leone's former vice president, 2015-2018, and seasoned APC stalwart, surfaced in a magistrate's court as being implicated in a $45,390 fraud case. The revelations emerged during cross-examination of the lead investigating officer, Police Sub-Inspector Hassan Kargbo, in proceedings against one Alhaji Idris Toure, accused of defrauding a complainant, Teresa Safa, by promising to facilitate U.S. travel for 6 individuals. According to Kargbo's testimony, Toure claimed he transferred $25,000 of the funds to Foh. Of that, Toure alleges Foh pocketed $15,000 and returned the rest to him for documentation purposes. Toure also stated that it was Foh who directed him to collect money from Safa and deliver passports to an unnamed ministry. When challenged on whether he and Foh conspired in the scheme, Toure remained silent. Investigators had tried to summon Foh for questioning, but he was reportedly out of town, leading them instead to take a statement from Mrs. Foh. Kargbo affirmed that Foh himself was not formally investigated, labeling the former vice president's information irrelevant. Mrs. Foh later deposited $10,000 at the Criminal Investigations Department, CID, claiming it was a partial repayment to the complainant, though the defense counsel questioned whether that money ever reached Safa. Magistrate Solomon Kakura proposed that Mrs. Foh be summoned to clarify the final disposition of the funds. Meanwhile, the core fraud accusation is that Toure persuaded Safa in March 2025 to pay him so he could arrange U.S. visas for 6 people. The prosecutor says he took the money but did not deliver as promised. Toure was arrested in May 2025 in Bo after initially evading capture, and despite allegedly committing twice to repay, he has yet to do so. Putting it in context, power, politics, and reputations. The mere naming of a former vice president in court can reverberate far beyond the local legal drama. Victor Foh is no political lightweight. He once served as Sierra Leone's ambassador to China and has been a longtime functionary of the All People's Congress, APC, party. Thus, even an unproven allegation carries risks to his personal legacy, his party's image, and public confidence in institutions. But caution is needed. At present, Foh has not been formally charged, and his involvement remains alleged. The case pivots heavily on Toure's testimony, itself not incontestable. The $10,000 deposited by Mrs. Foh raises questions. Was it genuine repayment? Who got it? But its strategic timing is curious. The defense will doubtless push on procedural, evidential, and credibility grounds. So, before heads roll, courts must sort fact from fiction. We have witnessed in African politics over the decades how the accusation is sometimes the punishment, regardless of final verdict. African comparisons, when power and allegations collide. This is not unique to Sierra Leone. Across the continent, high-ranking figures regularly find themselves embroiled in financial scandal. In Nigeria, ex-governors and federal ministers have often ended up in anti-corruption trials, some walking free, others convicted, many held in limbo. In Kenya, former President Uhuru Kenyatta faced ICC charges, albeit in the domain of electoral violence, and was dogged by corruption allegations, though many cases stalled. In South Africa, Jacob Zuma's protracted legal crucible over arms deals, and state capture-stoked national crises. In Ghana, former ministers have been prosecuted under the Public Procurement Act, or for alleged embezzlement, with results varying wildly. What distinguishes the Foh case is its smaller scale. USD 45,000 is large in Sierra Leone's context, but modest by international standards, and its reliance on what appears to be a middleman's confession. In many African cases, the accusations are backed by forensic audits, detailed financial trails, leaked documents, or international cooperation, e.g., mutual legal assistance. In the Foh matter so far, the case is more about paper trails than hard forensic excavation. Still, the dynamics are similar: political loyalty, institutional pressure, reputational damage, and uncertainty about whether justice will be blind. Going forward, what to watch and what should happen. If I were playing judge, jurist, or, more realistically, political columnist, here's my prescription, with a pinch of skepticism and, yes, humor. 1. Summons and fair investigation. The court should grant the defense's request to summon Mrs. Foh, or any relevant witness, to clarify who actually got the $10,000. Anything less would feed public suspicion of selective justice. 2. Open the books. Investigators should demand full accounting, bank records, wire transfers, correspondence, and any ministry logs tied to passports or travel facilitation. If the defense claims irrelevance now, it's hard to see that argument holding when evidence surfaces. 3. Test Touré's credibility. If Touré's testimony is central, the defense must be allowed to probe his history, prior statements, inconsistencies, and motive, e.g., shifting blame to climb out of a hole. 4. Ensure procedural fairness. The court and investigators must avoid shortcuts. If Foh was out of town, fine. But that cannot be a free pass forever. If protocols, e.g. search warrants, subpoenas, are observed, the trial will carry legitimacy. 5. Public transparency and media safeguards. Given Foh's status and the public interest, media coverage should be allowed within legal limits so that Sierra Leoneans feel the process is real, not a cover-up. Attack ads and rumor mills will run wild. 6. Institutional reforms and checks. Whether or not Foh is convicted, Sierra Leone, like many African states, should leverage this moment to strengthen its institutions, anti-corruption agencies, judicial independence, financial oversight, passport, travel documentation systems. Otherwise, we'll just be replaying the same soap opera with a new cast. 7. Avoid political witch hunts. The opposition or ruling party must resist the impulse to weaponize the case. If Foh is innocent, a sham trial will backfire. If he's guilty, letting him run free will erode faith in the rule of law. Balance is vital. And yes, I hope the judge has a good sense of humor. Perhaps ordering that $10,000 deposit come with a "please do explain" sticky note. Recent developments and what's new. At the moment, public coverage is limited and somewhat repetitive, echoing much of the original allegation. Africa Press republished the full available summary of the case. No definitive new revelations, e.g. leaked bank records or subpoenaed emails, have surfaced. The story remains in the accusation and response phase. What is noteworthy is the relative calm. No mass protests, no sweeping statements from APC insiders, no counter-litigation by Foh yet. That suggests either a strategy of circumspection or internal negotiation behind closed doors. Another small development, the involvement of Mrs. Foh in depositing $10,000 has become a focal flashpoint. Defense counsel is pressing on that angle, asking who gave whom the money, whether it ever reached the complainant, and whether it was coerced or voluntary. The court's willingness to summon her will be a test of resolve. Critical observations and risks, reliance on a single narrator. The case's backbone is Touré's testimony. If his credibility is shredded, much of the case unravels. This is especially risky in courts where cross-examination and procedural rigor may be uneven. Selective non-investigation. The fact that Foh was not investigated, per Cargbo, raises eyebrow. Why is a former vice president's input considered irrelevant? Either the investigative team is massively biased or they fear political backlash. Either option is problematic. Public trust and cynicism. For Sierra Leoneans, accustomed to impunity, even a fair process may not convince. If Foh is acquitted or the case stalls, many will interpret it as the elite escaping consequences. If convicted, some will claim political vendetta. Slippery precedents. If the courts botch this case, either by procedural missteps or political interference, it may set a precedent for stronger or weaker future accountability. The integrity of Sierra Leone's justice institutions is at stake. Regional and continental implications, fellow African nations will watch. If Sierra Leone manages a transparent, credible trial of a former vice president, it could become a regional reference point. If it fails, it joins the regrettable list of high-profile allegations that fizzled. Legal Deep Dive, Sierra Leone's procedures, precedents, and pitfall standards of evidence and burden of proof. In Sierra Leone's criminal law tradition, the prosecution bears the burden of proving guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. That is standard in many common law and hybrid African jurisdictions. The defense can challenge the reliability and consistency of witness testimony, e.g. Touré. The presence or absence of corroborating evidence, bank statements, electronic trails, correspondence, chain of custody and procedural regularity. Were warrants, subpoenas, proper notices used? Credibility issues, bias, motive, inducement, prior inconsistent statements. If the state's case rests heavily on a single narrative, the defendant's confession or a co-defendant's claim, the risk is that the court may find it insufficient unless buttressed by independent proof. Jurisdiction, immunities, and preclusion arguments. One delicate legal question is whether a former vice president enjoys any residual immunity from criminal process in certain circumstances. In the cited related case, State versus Sheka Sahid Kamara and Victor Bockarie Foh and others, there was argument that as vice president, Foh could not properly be subject to certain criminal process. That raises a threshold issue. Procedural challenges by defense counsel could seek dismissal or stay on grounds that the court lacks jurisdiction or that proper process was not followed. Also relevant is precedent. In Sierra Leone's appeal records, Foh himself once brought an appeal to the Court of Appeal, challenging a conviction and sentence. That shows he is no stranger to litigating complex procedural issues. Thus, before the court even reaches the meat of the evidence, there may be vigorous contestation over whether certain claims should even go forward, summoning witnesses and expanding the record. If Magistrate Kakura allows the defense to summon Mrs. Foh or other individuals, that will broaden the factual record. The court could then demand sworn testimony from Mrs. Foh about the $10,000, who gave it, when, how, and to whom it was sent, if at all. Bank records, deposits, withdrawals of both the Foh household and Touré, linked to the time frame in question. Documentary evidence from the ministry allegedly involved, passport, documentation logs, internal memos. Any communication, letters, texts, emails, between Touré and Foh or related parties. The introduction of such evidence might transform the case from a narrow confessions-reliant fight into a more layered forensic contest. Appeal routes and time horizons. Assuming a decision, acquittal or conviction, is rendered, appeals are likely, possibly through the High Court, Court of Appeal, and even the Supreme Court, depending on constitutional and procedural points at stake. Given Foh's political stature and legal experience, high-stakes legal arguments may emerge, such as challenges to evidence admissibility, alleged prosecutorial misconduct, or constitutional due process violations. Because of that, even a first-instance verdict will probably not be the last word. The case could stretch over months, sometimes years, before final resolution. Public opinion, media, and political theater, the narrative battle and media dynamics. In high-profile cases like this, courtroom proceedings are only part of the battle. The public narrative often matters more, and the media is the arena. Pro-Foh media might argue he's a scapegoat, a victim of political vendetta, or that the case is thin and relies on coerced testimony. They may portray Mrs. Foh's $10,000 deposit as a noble effort at restitution. Critical outlets and opposition voices will emphasize transparency, past allegations, potential impunity, and demand a full accounting. Independent or investigative journalism, if it emerges, will be key. If leaks of bank statements, transaction logs, recorded conversations, or whistleblowers appear, they could shift momentum. Because Sierra Leone's human rights and institutional record is still under strain, with concerns over arbitrary arrest, impunity, press self-censorship, and weak enforcement of legal protections, the media space can be treacherous. Journalists may face intimidation, subtle pressure, or backlash, especially given the stakes. The government and opposition may both try to control the narrative or influence court of public opinion, public sentiment, and skepticism. Sierra Leoneans are not naive. Many citizens have seen repeated allegations against elites that peter out or are quietly shelved. For many, Foh's case may already be contextualized as one more in a long line of charges that never stick. Observers might doubt that the $10,000 deposit ever reached the complainant, suspect the investigation is being calibrated to protect powerful interests, view any acquittal as a confirmation of elite impunity, or view a conviction as long overdue accountability, though even that may be read through the lens of political opportunism. In short, even before the verdict, much of the public will have already decided in their own minds. The court's job is partly to convince the skeptics. Verdict scenarios, risks, and political fallout, 2026 and beyond. Let's peer ahead to possible outcomes and their implications. And yes, throw in a few wild cards because politics loves surprises. Scenario 1. Acquittal or dismissal for insufficient evidence. Result: the court finds the state fails to meet the burden or procedural defects force dismissal. Implications: strong narratives of victory for Foh and his allies. Opposition and civil society cry foul, justice withheld. Erosion of trust in prosecutorial capacity, especially if the case was seen as a test. Incentive for other powerful actors to push back on accountability efforts. If Foh can escape, so can we. Risk: if the public perceives the acquittal as rigged or arbitrary, the backlash could intensify. The discourse may shift from "did he do it?" to "why do they always get away?" Scenario 2, conviction, first instance, followed by appeals. Result: the court finds Foh culpable, possibly on conspiracy, receipt of funds, or related charges. He is sentenced, but appeals follow. Implications: huge reputational damage for Foh and potentially for the APC, if he remains aligned. Political leverage for rival parties. If justice prevails, no one is untouchable. Pressure on law enforcement and anti-corruption bodies to follow through. If they are perceived as mere tools, backlash may come. In appeals, the defense will likely attack procedural integrity, evidence admissibility, and chain of custody, meaning the conviction might be overturned or softened. Risk: an overzealous trial, e.g. questionable evidence practices, could provoke reversal or judicial embarrassment on appeal. Scenario 3, plea bargain or settlement. Result: midway, Parties negotiate a partial admission, payment plan, or reduced charges, perhaps with a promise that implicated persons, like Foh, avoid criminal exposure. Implications could save face for Foh and limit political fallout, but seen by many as, again, accountability through deals, a compromise that breeds cynicism. Future probes may be less ambitious if settlement is seen as the path to avoid high stakes. The state's deterrent value may suffer. Why pursue full trial when deals are possible? Risk: public backlash for perceived soft landing, especially from victims or civil society. Looking ahead, what this means for Sierra Leone, 2026 and beyond. 1. Institutional credibility is on the line. The outcome and fairness of this case could be a benchmark. If Sierra Leone proves it can prosecute those at the top with transparency and due process, it may slow elite impunity. If not, it reinforces the long-standing narrative that powerful people are above the law. 2. Anti-corruption architecture and enforcement bodies, like the Sierra Leone Anti-Corruption Commission, ACC, will come under scrutiny. Their willingness and safety to investigate and bring cases against top officials hinges partly on whether the Foh case is allowed to proceed credibly. 3. Political recalculations and party dynamics. Within the APC and across the political spectrum, allegiances may shift. If Foh is weakened, other power brokers may step in. If he emerges strong or vindicated, he may reassert influence or reposition himself for 2028 politics. 4. Precedent for future cases. This case may serve as a template, good or bad, for how to handle elite corruption. Lawyers, judges, and investigators will watch closely. The better the procedural safeguards, the more likely future cases can build rather than collapse. 5. Public expectations and civic demand. Citizens, civil society, NGOs, and the media will expect not just a fair trial, but visible accountability. If they get that, it can rebuild faith in institutions. If not, cynicism may deepen, protests may recur, and social trust erode. 6. Regional and continental signaling. Other African nations, especially smaller ones battling corruption, will observe. A Sierra Leone that succeeds in this case with integrity can become a regional reference. If it fails, it becomes one more cautionary tale of big men wins. The verdict forecast between law, politics, and connections. If Sierra Leonean courtrooms could talk, they'd tell stories that rival Nollywood scripts, complete with suspense, betrayal, and occasional divine intervention. The Victor Foh saga is shaping up to be one such production. But unlike cinema, this has real consequences for justice and governance. Probability matrix. How might this play out? Scenario description. Likelihood as of Oct 2025. Impact on Foh's reputation. Impact on public trust. 1. Procedural dismissal case thrown out due to lack of sufficient evidence or procedural irregularity. 40% public suspicion grows. Foh's camp celebrates vindication. Declines sharply. Déjà vu of elite impunity. 2. Partial conviction. Toure guilty. Foh uncharged. Toure takes the fall. Court hints at other parties involved. 30% Foh appears politically bruised but legally safe. Slight improvement. Symbolic justice. 3. Full trial, involving Foh court summons. Foh evidence broadens, case becomes political theater. 20% damaging, but gives him a platform to fight back. Moderate boost, shows systems' willingness to act. 4. Behind-the-scenes settlement. Quiet repayment deal, case fades, no formal conviction. 10% public laughs cynically. They always find a way. Faith in justice system plummets again. Most probable outcome. Scenario 2. Partial conviction of Toure, with Foh cleared on technical grounds but publicly tainted. Because in Sierra Leonean political folklore, it's not the verdict that matters, it's who makes the phone call. The 2026-2028 timeline. Law meets election season. 2026, the cooling period. The case will likely drag through 2026 in slow motion. Legal delays, Foh unavailable, witness not present, files missing at the registry, could buy time until public interest wanes. If Mrs. Foh is ever called to testify, it could be the year's most watched courtroom moment, right after the Leone exchange rate forecast. Expect occasional courtroom drama, political proxies arguing the case on radio talk shows, memes on WhatsApp reading, "If $10,000 can go missing in CID, imagine our national budget." 2027, political reawakening. With national elections on the horizon, Foh's case becomes political ammunition. Ruling SLPP. Look at the APC. Even their vice presidents face fraud allegations. Opposition APC. The SLPP's justice system targets our leaders while shielding theirs. If the judiciary mishandles the case, it could feed perceptions of selective justice, a narrative that may influence voter sentiment, especially among the politically active youth and civil servants disillusioned by elite double standards. 2028, the electoral earthquake. By 2028, the story may resurface during campaign season. If Foh's name remains unblemished, he could reemerge as a kingmaker or elder statesman, the grandfather of APC reconciliation. If he's politically weakened, younger APC figures will use the case to argue for generational change. Either way, the phrase 45 and 390 might linger in public discourse as shorthand for elite mischief in small packages. And if you think 45K isn't much, remember, that's roughly NL 900,000, enough to fund the average Sierra Leonean school's lunch program for months. In a nation where ordinary citizens hustle to pay exam fees, that figure carries emotional weight. Continental reflections. Africa's big men and small justice. Across the continent, cases like this echo a familiar tune, the theatrics of anti-corruption. It's the dance where investigators start strong with moral fire, politicians act shocked and promise transparency, journalists dig deep until national security is invoked, and eventually the case fades, replaced by new scandals. Comparative snapshot country, prominent scandal, outcome pattern, Nigeria ex-minister Diazani Alison Madueke, alleged billions in corruption, ongoing extradition drama, delay, denial, deflection. Kenya Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua's 2022 graft case, charges dropped post-election law fades when politics wins. South Africa Jacob Zuma's state capture trial, endless adjournments postponed until democracy strengthens. Ghana Cecilia Dapa. Cash in-house scandal investigation continues. No charges yet. Shock, memes, silence. Sierra Leone Victor Foh. 45K visa fraud. Link case ongoing local version of Deja Vu. So Sierra Leone isn't alone. It's simply rehearsing a script too many African nations know by heart. The war on corruption that never quite reaches the generals. The humor behind the headlines, $45, $390 and counting. Some Sierra Leoneans joke that this case proves how inflation has even reached corruption. How can a whole vice president settle for only $15,000? Others say maybe he was just facilitating documentation fees, the unofficial term for helping the process move faster than paperwork. Whatever the punchline, the underlying message is deadly serious. When senior figures are even named in such cases, it damages institutional legitimacy far beyond the immediate sum involved. Forward-looking reflections, rebuilding trust, one case at a time. To restore faith, Sierra Leone, and indeed Africa, must move from justice by headlines to justice by evidence. This requires 1. Empowering investigators, shield them from political interference, guarantee resources, and professionalize financial forensics. 2. Digitalizing case management. No more missing files. Court and police records must be electronically stored and accessible for oversight. 3. Regional anti-corruption collaboration. ESOWES and AU can push for cross-border investigative protocols so that a missing 15,000 doesn't disappear into another jurisdiction. 4. Public accountability reporting. After every high-profile case, justice institutions should publish public summaries detailing what was proven, what failed, and why. 5. Civic humor as oversight. Believe it or not, satire and comedy can keep accountability alive. When people joke about 45K Gate, they are, in essence, reminding leaders that the people are watching, even if with laughter instead of pitchforks. The bigger picture, lessons for Africa's leadership and justice systems. If there's one thing African politics never lacks, it's drama wrapped in diplomacy. The alleged $45,390 fraud case implicating Sierra Leone's former vice president Victor Bockarie Foh may seem minor next to billion-dollar scandals elsewhere, but its symbolic weight is immense. It's a test, not only of Sierra Leone's judicial independence, but also of Africa's collective political maturity. 1. The price of selective justice. Across Africa, citizens have grown weary of what Nigerians call corruption fighting back. Too often, justice depends on which faction holds the sword. A ruling party official is called honorable, but once they fall out of favor, the same person becomes dishonorable overnight. Selective justice undermines credibility faster than outright corruption. In Foh's case, if he's truly innocent, clearing him transparently could strengthen institutions. But if political connections keep him beyond reach, it reinforces cynicism that the law is merely a network for the powerless. 2. The mirage of anti-corruption rhetoric. From Abuja to Freetown, Nairobi to Pretoria, every administration promises to root out corruption. Yet investigations often end up as political theater. Africa doesn't lack anti-corruption commissions. It lacks the courage to let them operate freely. Sierra Leone's Anti-Corruption Commission, ACC, has made progress in some areas, prosecuting junior officials, auditing agencies. But high-level cases remain a graveyard of delays and missing evidence. If this case ends without a credible resolution, it will join that pile. 3. Institutional independence, more than a buzzword. True reform begins when institutions outlive individuals. The judiciary, police, and anti-corruption bodies must function whether the accused is a driver, a minister, or a former vice president. The moment law enforcement officers begin classifying information about powerful suspects as irrelevant, the system ceases to be neutral. It becomes ornamental. 4. Economic context matters. In a country battling inflation, unemployment, and currency depreciation, a $45,000 fraud allegation isn't just about numbers. It's about justice versus inequality. When the average teacher earns less than $150 a month, hearing that thousands of dollars were facilitating documentation hits a raw nerve. Africans don't expect miracles, they expect fairness. When the poor are jailed for petty theft, while the rich negotiate repayment deals, national unity fractures. 5. The media's role in the accountability chain. Africa's free press remains both hero and hostage. In Sierra Leone, outlets like Politico, Awoko, and the Sierra Leone Telegraph continue to report courageously, despite limited resources and political intimidation. But the press must also avoid sensationalism and maintain factual rigor. Injustice thrives on both silence and exaggeration. A vigilant but responsible media is the oxygen of democracy. Continental implications. Africa's crossroads between power and principle. The Foh case resonates across African capitals, where past leaders hover over court dockets like shadows that refuse to fade. From Zuma's state capture legacy in South Africa to the unresolved corruption cases in Nigeria and Kenya, the pattern is familiar. The higher the office, the thicker the immunity. But as African citizens become more informed and digitally connected, tolerance for double standards is shrinking. WhatsApp, X, Twitter, and TikTok now serve as virtual courts, amplifying scrutiny, satire, and public demand for justice. Even the most insulated leaders can no longer escape moral accountability. In a sense, Africa is entering a new era of governance visibility, where silence speaks louder than statements. A nation that fails to punish wrongdoing teaches the next generation that crime pays, as long as it's done in a suit and tie. Advice to African leaders: the mirror test. Every African leader, past or present, should take this case as a mirror moment, a reminder that power is temporary, but legacy is permanent. Here are 5 truths worth reflecting upon. 1. Governance is not ownership. National resources and public offices are not private estates. Stewardship ends when self-interest begins. 2. Accountability starts from the top. When leaders willingly subject themselves to scrutiny, their moral authority strengthens, not weakens. 3. Protect institutions, not individuals. The judiciary and anti-corruption agencies should never fear or favor. Let them bite when they must, even if the bite leaves political scars. 4. Lead by example. A leader who demands integrity must model it. Citizens imitate conduct, not speeches. 5. Remember, the people's patience has limits. The African youth, the most connected and conscious generation yet, is watching. If justice continues to dance around the powerful, history may not. Summary, key messages, and final reflection. The Bockarie Foh alleged fraud case is more than a courtroom drama. It's a national stress test for Sierra Leone's justice system and a Continental case study in political accountability. It reveals how fragile institutional independence remains when political influence intrudes. How African societies measure justice not by verdicts, but by fairness. How credibility is built through transparency, not through theatrics. And how humor has become the citizen's last weapon against despair. Whether or not Foh is found guilty, the real verdict belongs to Sierra Leone's people, and by extension, to all Africans who demand leadership with integrity. For in the end, democracy is not tested in elections, but in the courtroom, where power meets the law and truth stands alone. As Africa's citizens often say in street wisdom, you can borrow power, but you can't borrow a clean name. Thank you for watching The Bold African Voice, BAV, where truth meets courage. In the end, this story isn't just about one man. It's about the system that makes men untouchable. If Africa must rise, justice must stop tiptoeing around power. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe, because the louder we speak, the stronger Africa becomes. And remember, in the continent's court of conscience, truth always delivers the final verdict.